I never thought a single text could make my heart skip like it just did. I sat at my glass desk, sunlight pouring over the city's skyline outside my window, the soft hum of traffic far below almost hypnotic. My silk blouse felt impossibly tight across my shoulders, not because of weight, but tension. The vibration of my phone against the polished oak startled me. It was from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. A memory I'd buried deep, when I wasn't sure I wanted to dredge up. My fingers hovered over the screen as a small, ironic smile tugged at my lips. Life had been kind in some ways and ruthless in others. I'd built a world they'd never imagine. Walls lined with abstract paintings, a mahogany bookshelf stacked with first editions, a corner office that whispered of authority and success. But beneath it all, certain truths remained hidden. I sipped my coffee, savoring its warmth, letting my mind drift back. How I ended up here, standing in heels that clicked against the marble floor, leading a team of people who respected me, was a story few knew. The past had a way of sneaking up at the most unexpected times. And now, of all days, the memory of the garage, of Dad's cold words sending me away to eat alone, came flooding back. My pulse quickened. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was unfinished business. I could almost see the man in the Ferrari, leaning casually against the hood, the beginning of a story that had changed everything. I was 16, sitting on the cold concrete floor of the garage, my dinner untouched in front of me. Dad's words still echoed. "Go eat out there. Don't bother me." His voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet of the house like a knife. I clenched my fists, the sting of humiliation burning hotter than the cold draft that crept under the garage door. Mom had tried to intervene once, years ago, but she'd been tired, worn thin by his moods. I was alone in the echo of my own thoughts, trying not to cry while the metallic scent of old oil and rubber filled the air. I hated feeling small, invisible, but at that moment, that was exactly what I was. Then, a sound, a low, familiar engine rumble, shifted everything. I looked up and froze. A sleek Ferrari gleamed in the dim light, its red paint almost surreal against the gray concrete. And leaning casually against it was a man who didn't belong in our quiet cul-de-sac. He had the kind of confidence that didn't need to shout to be heard, a knowing smile that seemed to say he saw more than anyone else did. "You Olivia?" His voice was calm but pointed, as if he already knew the story etched on my face. I nodded, wary, unsure whether to run or speak. "I think I can help you," he said, sliding a small envelope into my hand. It wasn't money, not exactly, but an opportunity. Inside, a letter that felt like a key to another life, one where Dad's dismissals didn't define me, where my potential wasn't measured by a garage floor dinner. Before he drove away, I felt a spark ignite in me, a mixture of fear and hope. I couldn't explain it then, but something in that moment whispered, "You are meant for more than this." That night, clutching the envelope, I remembered Grandma's words from years before. "Olivia, life isn't about waiting for permission. It's about seizing what's yours and proving your worth in your own time." Her soft voice contrasted with the harshness of Dad's, and I felt the first real surge of determination. By the time I went to bed, I had decided. I would step into a world I didn't yet understand, but it would be on my terms. That Ferrari, that man, and that envelope, they were the catalysts for a life that would eventually surprise everyone, especially me. The weeks after that night felt like stepping into a different world. The envelope held an introduction to a boutique design firm in the city, along with a handwritten note. "Show them what they don't yet see in you." My heart raced as I walked through the glass doors of that office for the first time, my hands trembling, the leather of my purse warm against my side. I met Ms. Catherine Lowell, a woman whose reputation preceded her. Sharp eyes, sharper mind, and a kind of warmth that disarmed the fear I carried from home. She didn't coddle me, didn't whisper reassurances. Instead, she handed me a blank project file and said, "Make it yours. Prove it to yourself first." The first nights were brutal. I sat at my tiny desk in the corner of a shared office, long after everyone else left, staring at the computer screen until my eyes ached. I questioned myself constantly. Was I talented enough? Strong enough? Worthy of the chance that had fallen into my lap. Every error felt like a reflection of that 16-year-old girl on the garage floor, rejected and invisible. But slowly, the pieces started to come together. My first project, a small residential redesign, was approved with a nod from Catherine. Then a bigger one. I learned to trust my instincts, to turn fear into fuel. The man in the Ferrari had been right. I was meant for more. I found mentors in unexpected places. A colleague who encouraged me to pitch ideas I thought were too bold. A client who insisted I run the project myself. Each success, no matter how small, built a layer of confidence I didn't know I had. My hands still shook sometimes, but the tremor was now excitement, not despair. The first big sale felt surreal. I remembered Grandma's words, whispered in my mind, "Seize what's yours." I had never imagined the sense of pride that comes from creating something entirely my own, from earning respect purely on merit. Yet I kept it hidden. Every time I posted pictures on social media, it was filtered, understated. Family didn't need to know I had moved beyond the life they'd confined me to. I learned subtle ways to avoid detection. I rented an apartment in a different district, kept my work schedule flexible, and answered home calls with careful vagueness. Every milestone first. Profitable client, first praise from a prominent magazine, first recognition in the industry, was quietly celebrated, a secret victory against the narrative Dad had tried to impose. Even now, years later, I can still feel the thrill of those early days. The risk, the quiet triumph, the constant balancing act of becoming someone I was always meant to be while keeping the past at bay. That balance was delicate, yet exhilarating. And every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of a Ferrari on the street and smile, remembering how a stranger's belief in me had turned a lonely girl in a garage into a woman quietly shaping her destiny. The day they came to see me, I had already prepared everything, though preparation wasn't about impressing them. It was about revealing the truth they had refused to see. The elevator doors opened, and Dad and my older brother, Jason, stepped into the lobby of my office building, their expressions a mix of curiosity and barely concealed judgment. "Olivia?" Dad's voice was uncertain, far from the commanding tone he usually carried. I smiled, calm, composed, letting my heels click on the polished marble as I led them down the hall. The office space reflected years of careful effort, walls adorned with abstract paintings I had handpicked, a sleek mahogany desk stacked with neatly arranged awards and certificates, a corner shelf displaying prototypes from projects I had launched. Even the scent of fresh orchids on the windowsill felt deliberate, a subtle but unmistakable statement of personal taste and control. They lingered at the doorway, eyes widening. Jason muttered something under his breath, maybe disbelief, maybe awe, but said nothing. I gestured toward the large floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "You wanted to see where your little girl ended up?" I said softly, almost conversationally. "Here it is." Dad swallowed hard, the silence thick between us. He hadn't expected this. None of them had. He'd imagined me struggling, maybe timidly working some small job while he looked on, smug in his assumptions. But this wasn't what he had prepared for. I walked past my desk to the small conference area, where a digital portfolio played slides of my projects. Each one highlighted months of hard work, creativity, and determination. I saw recognition flicker in Jason's eyes, but also guilt. Dad's jaw tightened, the lines on his face softening ever so slightly as the reality sank in. "I wanted to wait until you were ready," I said, my voice steady. "But it seems you're finally ready to witness it." I paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "You own all this?" Dad asked finally, disbelief threading his voice. "Yes," I said simply. "I'm the CEO of my firm. I manage multiple properties. And yes, I did all of this without your help. In fact, I built it while learning to ignore the limitations you tried to place on me." Their reactions were instant: shock, shame, awe, maybe even a flicker of regret. Jason's eyes darted toward Dad, as if asking why he had never encouraged me, and Dad looked away, the familiar authority stripped down to something almost human. I let them take it all in. No lectures. No accusations. Just the truth of my life, standing confidently in the space I had earned. Then, finally, I smiled again. I wanted you to see me like this. Not for approval, not for validation, but so you understand. The girl you sent to the garage to eat alone? She's not alone anymore. For the first time, I saw Dad falter, truly falter. Jason's shoulders slumped, and I realized that this moment, this reveal, was more than a triumph for me. It was a confrontation of the past, a reclamation of dignity, a lesson in respect they hadn't yet learned. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch just long enough for them to feel the weight of what had happened. This wasn't just about revealing success. It was about setting boundaries, reclaiming control, and establishing what respect truly meant. Look, I began, my voice calm but firm. I'm willing to support you now, but on my terms. Not because I owe you, but because I care about what you're capable of becoming. Dad looked stunned. Jason shuffled his feet, unsure whether to meet my eyes. First, I said, Dad, you need to acknowledge that your words and actions shaped my past. And if you want a future in my life, you need to listen before you speak, support before you criticize. No more dismissals, no more sending me to a garage to eat alone. He swallowed, a lump in his throat, but said nothing. And Jason, I continued, turning to my brother, you have potential too. But you can't rely on my accomplishments to define your path. You need to pursue your goals with integrity, not entitlement. I walked slowly past them, letting the office, the proof of my journey, sink in. Everyone here has a choice. You can stay in the past, clinging to old habits and mistakes, or you can step forward and meet me halfway. But the conditions are simple: respect, effort, and accountability. Everything else is negotiable. I pulled out the envelope I had received all those years ago, the catalyst of my independence, and held it in front of them. This is what started my journey. Opportunity, belief, and the courage to act. I expect you to find your own version of this, without dragging me back into the old patterns that once held me down. Their faces softened, shame and understanding mixing in a complex tapestry of emotions. They realized that my power wasn't just in my wealth or position, it was in my clarity, my boundaries, and my ability to act decisively. I'm not asking for blind gratitude, I said, my tone firm but not unkind. I'm asking for growth. For change. For the kind of family dynamic that doesn't wound each other, but lifts us all. You'll have my guidance where needed, but only if you're willing to put in the work. Dad's voice trembled, but it was the first authentic sound I had heard from him in years. Olivia, we will try. Jason nodded silently, the first spark of humility I'd ever seen in him. I allowed a small smile. That was all I needed for now. The power shift had been made, and the rules of engagement were clear. Compassion and firmness walked hand in hand, and I finally felt free from the old cycles. The garage, the isolation, the dismissals, they existed only as a memory now, fueling my confidence rather than my fear. Weeks passed, and slowly, subtly, things began to change. Dad no longer barked orders or dismissed opinions. He asked questions now, listened when I spoke, and even offered advice, but only when solicited. Jason began pursuing his own projects, not for approval, but because he finally felt the spark of ambition on his own terms. I watched them from my office one evening, the sun dipping behind the skyline, casting a golden glow over the room. The orchids on my windowsill bloomed again, a quiet reminder of patience and resilience. I sipped my coffee, noticing the faint aroma of roasted beans mingling with the city air, and felt a profound sense of closure. The envelope I had held all those years ago still rested in my drawer. I opened it carefully, tracing the edges with my fingers. The words inside hadn't changed, but the meaning had evolved. It wasn't just an opportunity, it was a symbol of belief, of courage, and of the moment I decided my life would not be dictated by someone else's limitations. I thought of the girl I once was, the one sitting alone in the garage, fists clenched, heart aching, and smiled. She would be proud of what I had built, not just in terms of wealth or recognition, but in strength, independence, and grace. That strength had shaped everything: my career, my choices, my relationships. And it had allowed me to rebuild family connections without losing myself in the process. They were learning, growing, stumbling at times. But the difference now was that I had the power to guide, not be guided, and to set standards that nurtured rather than diminished. I leaned back in my chair, eyes drifting over the city lights beginning to twinkle in the distance. Life had handed me moments of cruelty and doubt, but also catalysts for transformation. Every challenge had led me to this clarity, this place where past pain fueled present confidence. And in that quiet reflection, I knew the truth. I was no longer the girl sent to the garage to eat alone. I was the woman who had faced every obstacle, claimed every opportunity, and emerged whole. I had turned rejection into resilience, doubt into determination, and isolation into empowerment. With a soft exhale, I whispered to no one in particular, yet to everyone who had ever doubted me. I am enough. I am capable. And I am free.